Hey, this is Jeff, and welcome back to the Mothership Zeta no-kill run. There's a new mod feature I want to show you up front because it doesn't apply to loose, so we'll call this an alternate timeline and then reload. And I'm going to use a console command to kill all the enemies on the level so I have some peace and quiet while I'm doing it. Okay, now let's have a look at the Earth. Full disclosure, I went 10 years or more having no idea what part of the Earth I was looking at here, but based on information from the Fallout Wiki, now I can definitely see the Great Lakes, Ontario, Erie, Huron, Michigan, Superior, maybe the eastern seaboard of the United States, and I think that's Florida. We'll see in a minute why that's important. The current quest objective is to disable the death ray, which requires you to destroy all 4 generators in this room. There's one in each corner. And there are 4 switches on the control platform. If I can get up there. Don't need to be sneaking anymore. You might think 4 generators, 4 switches makes sense, but only this switch exposes the coolant pumps. You have to push it 4 times to open them all. Only one of these 2 can be active at one time. We'll see why in a minute. The coolant switch has the same label we've seen with every other generator, but this one, with the death ray icon, fires the death ray. Still aimed out into space from the warning shot we saw on the observation deck. The 2 over here aren't labeled, but they toggle the position of the death ray projector. The other position is presumably a target that the aliens pre-selected in case their first demonstration wasn't persuasive enough. So what happens if you fire it when it's pointed at Earth? Whoops! It's a bad day to be a Canadian. In the vanilla game, firing the death ray doesn't add to your kill count, but with the mod, it does. Thanks to the comments for that suggestion, because it's a great one. Check the Pip-Boy. Oh my. Thousands of people dead, 10 times as many creatures, and instantly very evil. The number is slightly randomized, but always large, and if you fire it again, everything under the fireball was instantly dead the first time, but there are people farther out who might have survived if we hadn't hit them a second time. If you keep going, you get lower numbers each time until it eventually tapers off to nothing, but if you're persistent, you can kill 20,000 people or more. You might think those numbers are a bit extreme, but if anything, they're actually low. The area under the fireball isn't densely populated in the real world, but the area of near-total destruction behind the ground reflection shockwave is 600 miles in diameter, give or take. A lot of that is wilderness too, but a good bit of it probably suffered less ecological damage after the Great War than the areas around big cities, kind of like New Vegas, but starting with temperate forest instead of desert. Bottom line, a lot of rad moose just got vaporized. But it's not all wilderness. Scattered across that area, you have Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Buffalo, a ton of smaller cities like Syracuse and Erie, plus a few more major cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland are technically outside the shockwave, but would almost certainly be wiped out by the tsunami racing across the Great Lakes. I thought of 2 ways to do the estimate, and both were in the same ballpark, but I'm going to reload the save, get back to the prime timeline, and destroy the generators while I'm talking about it. And we're back. Before I get too distracted explaining my casualty estimates, it's worth noting that the exit is locked behind a force field that only goes down after all 4 generators are destroyed. The good news is you don't need to wait for a generator to blow up before you can open the next one. Just keep pushing the switch after it resets to get all 4 generators open at once. The bad news is that when they do explode, reinforcements start coming through the teleporter in the corner, so if we take too much time, it might get kind of crowded in here. So, back to the casualty estimates. The easy way, which I only thought of after I did it the hard way, was, in the real world, tens of millions of people would be dead. Using the number of NPCs in Fallout 3 and 4 for reference, the post-war Northeast is about 99.9% depopulated compared to reality. So the casualties in-game would be in the tens of thousands. The hard way, which I did first, was to scale up the number of NPCs to a proportionately larger surface area. The real-world area of the locations in Fallout 3 is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 square miles. The playable area in-game is only like 18 because the geography is highly compressed for playability, but I mean if you measure the area from downtown DC out past Fairfax on a real-world map, it's about 1,000. The total destruction zone under the fireball, 100% casualties, is 8,000 square miles. The heavy damage zone, almost nothing left standing, even reinforced concrete buildings destroyed or severely damaged, extremely high casualties, is at least 200,000 square miles. And that's after subtracting the surface area of Lakes Ontario, Erie, and Huron. If we get lucky, the portable force field might get hit by friendly fire while the aliens are fighting the abominations. If not, what? It didn't blow up. Not sure why it turned off. Anyway, scale up the number of NPCs in Fallout 3 wilderness locations and settlements proportionally, and you get more than 100,000. Adjust down a bit because the casualty rate diminishes with distance from ground zero, and not an exact match with the easy method, but within an order of magnitude. So I went with 20,000, even though that's probably a bit conservative. And if you're still not convinced, consider this. The Great War was fought with vast numbers of low-yield nukes like the one in Megaton, which was a necessary plot device to have games set in city ruins. If they'd hit DC with thermonuclear city killers like we have in the real world, there wouldn't be any city ruins to explore. One would completely destroy everything in a 1.5-mile radius. Lighter structures like houses would be knocked down 7 miles away or more. The bomb in Megaton is closer to what we'd call a tactical nuke in the real world. They just used a lot of them, which is why some areas are more damaged than others. You'd see the flash of a nuke that size from space, especially at night, but you probably couldn't see the mushroom cloud without binoculars. And we could definitely see the death ray impact. Given that the size of a bomb in megatons and the radius of its shockwave have a cube-root relationship, the death ray impact was millions of times more powerful than the biggest nuke humans ever built. And we will never be back here, so we might as well jury-rig the healing arch for a full heal. Do some more looting while we wait for it to recharge. And of course, all that assumes the North American population distribution in an alternate timeline 200 years in the future is at all similar to reality. Canon sources imply it is, with major post-war settlements in the ruins of DC, Pittsburgh, and Boston in the games. Plus, Chicago, Detroit, and others are mentioned. But just because the lore doesn't mention something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Who's to say the death ray wouldn't blow up a huge, as-yet unmentioned metropolis built on the site of Algonquin Provincial Park? I mean, it's aimed at something, right? The Fallout Wiki says Ground Zero is near that park, which is more or less due north of Toronto and due west of Montreal. And like I say, once I read that, my mind's eye filled in the rest of the geography pretty quickly. Unless I'm imagining it based purely on the power of suggestion. But regardless of whether I have the orientation right, the stuff within the blast radius doesn't change. So the casualty estimates, I stand by them. Down here... I said last week there's something interesting in the living quarters, but it might be tricky to show you. Make that impossible. We'd need to destroy that force field generator. But the only silent weapons Luce has are the dart gun and the taser fist. Using a noisy weapon would be a death sentence because we'd be detected instantly and there's nowhere to lay low and get back to hidden. From the broken teleporter in the death ray hub to the living quarters exit, nada. If you're wondering why it's backwards and the aliens are on this side, Toshiro's back there, standing in a room full of dead aliens. Presumably he got back from wherever he went off to, noticed the teleporter at the top of the ship was active, and with some combination of luck and cleverness found another route from the observation deck to the living quarters. The aliens seem content to keep him trapped back there, and even if you destroy the force field, he won't follow you. He just stays there and meditates, so other than some loot, we're not really missing anything by skipping it. Other than the understated irony of seeing him be all zen while surrounded by the corpses of a dozen opponents. Interestingly, if you never found his sword, he'll have it anyway. I guess he ran across it when he was off on his own. If you found it but didn't give it to him, he'll be unarmed, but the aliens will still be dead. So, definitely not a man to be trifled with. Now, you can bypass the force field at this end by going through the cafeteria, but it's kind of crowded. We could wait and see if it deactivates on its own like the one at the entrance, but it doesn't look like there's any, but... Don't! There are turrets in all three of these rooms, and I must have walked right under that one. In the very first episode, I found out the hard way that if they're mounted on a low ceiling, you can bump into them without realizing it. Well, our only shot now is to beeline for the exit teleporter and hope we get there before we run out of stim packs. Ooh, abominations. Don't count your chickens, but if they kill the aliens, we might be able to get back to hidden. It's a long shot. I know I said there's nowhere to hide, but if we can just break line of sight while they're busy with each other, we could theoretically get back to caution, and that might be good enough. Unfortunately, I don't think enough of them got distracted for that to work. Yes, I'm looting while being killed. Well, if they're all upstairs, let's try downstairs. More down here. Every alien in the level is probably over here at this point, and that's probably more than we can realistically expect the abominations to kill. That's not going to work. We're out. Okay, so if we get detected, it's a death sentence might have been a slight exaggeration. Or maybe not. We're still in danger. I'm assuming they can't follow you through to the bridge. And we're back to caution, so hopefully the bridge crew won't come back here snooping around. Yep, I think we got away with it. Now, in the vanilla game, this switch doesn't do anything, at least nothing noticeable to the player. Unlike the other two times we had to turn on a teleporter for our allies, they don't immediately come through when you push it. And even if you never push it, they come through anyway after you secure the bridge. I don't think I ever mentioned there are workbenches on the ship. They don't look like wasteland workbenches, but they work exactly the same. Better late than never, I guess. Anyway, with the mod, your allies will come through immediately when you push the switch, allowing the quest objective to secure the bridge to be completed without the player killing anything. Or they're supposed to, anyway. Hold on. Well, the bug wasn't that hard to find, but in the process I thought of a way to refactor the alternate endgame script to make it a lot more efficient, and now I don't have time to finish playing the DLC and still get a video made. I guess I could just publish the whole thing next Monday, but I figure 2 short videos are just as good as 1 long one, right? I'll talk about that script next time because I don't want to spoil the ending any more than I already have, but I will show you how bumping up the kill count for firing the death ray at Earth works. First, it sets up some variables, so you get diminishing returns on subsequent firings. Then it checks to see if the feature is enabled and we haven't reached the maximum number of deaths. If those conditions are met, it checks the local variable death ray state to see if we're waiting for it to be fired. We need to track our own state separately from how the death ray state is tracked in the vanilla scripts for reasons we'll see in a second. If we're waiting for it to be fired, we check if it's pointed at Earth. If not, we do nothing. If it is, we check to see if the player has fired it. The vanilla script uses the variable isFiring to keep track of where it is in the firing sequence. Our script only runs every 5 seconds, but the whole sequence takes longer than that, so it doesn't matter exactly where in the sequence we catch it, it only matters that isFiring isn't 0. If it's been fired, we do some calculations, adjust people killed, creatures killed, and karma, and set death ray state to 1. If we adjusted the kill counts, we need to wait for the vanilla isFiring variable to get back to 0 so we don't double dip if our code happens to run twice while the vanilla firing sequence is still in progress. The biggest dilemma was setting the min-max values for the death toll. I did a bit of hand-waving during the gameplay section, but there are just so many assumptions and unknowns that it's really anybody's guess. Like I said, lining up what you see in the game with a real-world map, the total destruction zone under the fireball and primary shock front is maybe 50 miles across, and the heavy damage zone behind the ground reflection shockwave is at least 600. And theoretically, lighter structures like houses would be knocked down almost twice as far away, with a lower but still significant casualty rate. But there's no visible change in the capital wasteland, or the pit, which is even closer, which might mean the damage falls off faster with distance at that scale compared to the damage zones from a real-world thermonuclear explosion, or just that everything flimsy already fell down during the Great War and anything still standing now is really sturdy. Nobody mentions it during dialogue either, but that might just be because they have bigger problems on their minds. Hey, did you see that freak hurricane yesterday? Yeah, weird. Now, what are we going to do about those super mutants? Anyway, by some extremely BS back-of-the-envelope math, we're talking 20,000 creatures and maybe 1,000 people vaporized outright in the total destruction zone. And are there 200,000 creatures and 10,000 people in the wilderness part of the heavy damage zone? Casualty rate varies with distance, but over a much larger area. And as for the number of settlements comparable to the big ones in the capital wasteland of the Commonwealth, who knows? So I just called it 250,000 creatures and 20,000 people total. And then I added a small random amount to the maximums so a really persistent player wouldn't reach the limit and think, wow, I killed exactly 250,000 creatures and 20,000 people. What are the odds? And that was the hard way I talked about. When I thought of the easy way, I was relieved that the answer was surprisingly close, so that was a good sanity check if nothing else. I thought about making the karma adjustment a separately configurable feature, but come on. If you bombard 250,000 square miles into literal extinction from space, and you configure Pam to show you the death toll on your Pip-Boy, you know you're being naughty. And that's it. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you haven't already. And keep those questions and comments coming, because just like this feature, they really help make the mod better. Speaking of which, I will play a few captive audio logs next time because they're interesting and a couple of them actually relate to mod features in a tangential way. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon with the Mothership Zeta Grand Finale.